What's up, guys? Happy Thursday. We have a great show coming your way. 2 hours of GoJo and Golic about to start. Here's a few things that you can look forward to on today's show. Should NFL teams even want the #1 seed? We will discuss one seed history and the implications it could have. Plus, I do declare we got some NFL players making, or not NFL players, college players making decisions on whether they're going to stay in college or become NFL players. And Jimmy Butler is holding the Heat hostage, basically. Apparently, he wants a trade. We'll talk about all that and more. We have some great guests coming up on today's GoJo and Golic.
Well, coming up, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to the GoJo and Golic YouTube channel. Hit the little bell so you know when we're going live here. We missed y'all yesterday. We are glad to be back today. Plenty to get to, as Jesse mentioned. Andrew Whitworth from the Amazon Prime Thursday Night Desk going to join us here. Also got a great podcast that he does with Ryan Fitzpatrick from that desk, former Rams offensive lineman who I saw was front and center as the Rams hosted a wild card playoff game that was technically a home game for them, but obviously displaced by the fires here. So a guy very important to that organization. Going to talk to him about a couple important offensive line decisions coming up in this postseason run. Most specifically, I think with the Super Bowl defending champion Kansas City Chiefs and some big decisions they have to make up front. But, Dad, they have that extra time to make all these decisions because, as Jesse mentioned, we finally get to welcome the 1 seeds back into play here. The divisional round gives us back Kansas City and the Detroit Lions, and it's been a little while, and we've got some stats about the 1 seed and the way it's worked out for teams in this era where there is now only one team getting the bye every year. In the expanded NFL playoffs that go back to 2000, now that we have 7 seeds in here, only the 1 seeds get a bye where it used to be the 1 and 2 seed. And while I know a lot of people have disagreement with the way that changed and the different added stresses it puts on teams, it's changed the math a little bit. So, Dad, as we do get ready to welcome these teams back in here, the rest versus rust debate is always something that comes up here. Where do you usually fall when it comes to this added time off for teams and how they can go about managing that and not coming out and sucking on the backside?
Well, I mean, and you look at a #1 seed team, and it's normally, a couple of weeks of rest, right? Because week 18, there are teams like the Chiefs that don't play their starters. So you're getting week 18 off, you're getting the wild card weekend off, so you're getting a couple of weeks off. I am one. I mean, it's tough to negotiate because if you play a starter who is not, who is fine and ready to play, and he gets nicked up at all, you get damned for it. And if you go into a game as a higher seed with 2 weeks off of complete rest and you look bad and look rusty, you're damned for it. So, I mean, me personally, if you're healthy, and I use that term loosely because there's nobody that's 100% at the end of the year. But if you're not really managing an injury, I would play said person for X amount of time. Now, I do understand if you're going to play a quarterback, the offensive line comes along with that and the starters. If you're going to play a running back, like the Eagles chose to sit Saquon Barkley in week 18, because the offensive line that would have come along with it, and they were playing in the wild card, so they had a game the next week, so I could understand that. But for the 1 seeds, like Detroit, I mean, Detroit needed the rest. I would take it, Mike, on a year-to-year and team basis. Like Detroit was unbelievably beat up, and they really needed that extra week. Now they also had to play week 18 to solidify their spot as the #1 seed. So really their starters just got a week off as opposed to the Chiefs that got 2 off. But I'm normally one of those, if a guy is healthy, I would probably play him at least for a little bit in a game.
Yeah, well, that's talking about week 18 where you have to make that decision. I'm talking about, hey, you have the bye week now for these teams and how you go about managing that. You don't get a choice whether or not you play in the wild card round once you get that 1 seed. And for all the debate about that, Dad, I do think like it ignores, and this is the same thing that popped up college football. We had this discussion ostensibly for the first time ever this year because of the 12-team playoff format where you did have the 4 top seeds get that first round bye. And what happened? All the teams that got byes lost, and everyone started to look up and go, well, are you going to want the bye here? The answer to me in that regard, Dad, is still always yes, for a number of reasons. One, it's just simple math. you have to win one fewer game than everybody else to go and get the same trophy that everyone's vying for there. So mathematically, your path becomes easier. You do get the added benefit of being able to rest guys if you're dealing with injury, and you also avoid the risk of future injury. Like, I think that's the other part that gets lost is, yeah, you're resting guys up, and you also don't have to go put them at risk for another game there. And then the last part is, if you've got a coaching staff that's out here worth the damn, Dad, that gives them an extra opportunity, an extra week to go game plan. And everyone talked about Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams getting a chance to rest towards the end of the season, have a little bit of extra time to prepare for Kevin O'Connell and company. And look what it benefited them game plan wise. Look what it's traditionally done. And all of this, Dad, is skewed by the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Who are so used to being the 1 seed, having everything run through Arrowhead, which is the other advantage, you know, for the Detroit Lions. You're going to get to host home playoff games in Detroit again like you did last year. We saw what a raucous environment that was. And now the thought that even the NFC Championship runs through there is such a massive feather in your cap when you do have a home field advantage like Detroit, like Kansas City. So, Dad, any conversation we have about the viability of the 1 seed and rest versus rust, to me is silly. The advantages are so otherworldly that obviously everybody should be gunning for this. It's just teams like Kansas City who have recognized, hey, we don't need it. And the math bears out, Dad. Plenty of other teams do not need the 1 seed to win the Super Bowl in this expanded playoff era, but it's still a massive advantage that everyone is understandably gunning for.
Oh, without question, you want the week off. In a physical sport like this, you absolutely want the week off. And quite honestly, Kansas City does throw it off skew because they've had the 1 seed won the Super Bowl, and they didn't have the 1 seed last year. They went to Baltimore, who had the 1 seed, and they ran through and won the Super Bowl. And to your point of the math works, really not for the 1 seed. This expanded playoff has been going on since 2019, where you have 14 teams, one bye for each conference. And it was only after the 22 season that the 2 number 1 seeds made it. It was Kansas City and Philadelphia that made the Super Bowl. So 1 year, both 1 seeds. Again, the sample size is only 2019. From 2002 to 2019, when it was the old way, 7 number 1 seeds won a Super Bowl. So still, being a number 1 seed, you never want to turn down a bye ever. But it's not like number 1 seeds are winning or both number 1 seeds are getting to the Super Bowl. As I said, it happened just one time since 2019, but it's still the much more preferred position to be.
Yeah, if you look since 2020, there have been, I'm counting, 4 1 seeds that have made the Super Bowl in that time period. It was Kansas City twice, Philadelphia and San Francisco once each year. But you look at the teams that have won. Tampa Bay was a 5 seed. The Rams were a 4 seed. The Chiefs were a 1 seed in 2022, but then the Chiefs were a 3 seed last weekend. So it's all about what you make of it. And Dad, I think this goes back to it this time of year is you want something that your team is comfortable with. And if your team's not going to be comfortable, like Kansas City, they can go back and do the same thing they did a couple years ago when they were the 1 seed and go through this. They've got experience at this time of year. None of this is foreign to them when Andy Reid decides to give them a different off-day schedule than he would during a normal bye week during the season, because they all know how to do that. And the players at the core of this roster know how to get that message to the rest of the team. For Detroit, that's going to be interesting because that's a new experience for them. Now, that is a team that also has such a firm culture around there. Dan Campbell's created such an expectation and understanding of how they do things. And to your point, the mother at load at the end of all this is they just needed any chance to get guys more healthy. Terrion Arnold dealing with the foot injury there. Kevin Zeitler on the offensive line dealing with the hamstring injury going back a couple of weeks. So all of those things, massive to get those guys a little bit more time under task. And Dad, now coming into both of these teams being back out onto the field here, who do you think has the better opportunity, the easier path to getting back to the place that they want to get to in the Super Bowl? I guess back to for the Chiefs for the first time for the Detroit Lions now coming off this bye.
Well, I mean, I think, well, it would seem the Kansas City path is more difficult because Buffalo or Baltimore stands in the way. And Baltimore is playing incredible ball right now. Incredible ball. Buffalo beat Kansas City in the regular season, but we know struggles with them in the playoffs. Baltimore is just primed to make a Super Bowl run, yet with Lamar Jackson and this current team, they have faltered in the playoffs, i.e. last year when they were the number 1 seed and lost to Kansas City. I would say Detroit has an easier path, but they're dealing with injuries. But I never want to count out Kansas City because of Patrick Mahomes. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation where it's tough for me to sit here and say it's hard for Kansas City to not make it. At the beginning of the year, I picked both Detroit and Kansas City to make the Super Bowl with Detroit winning. So I have them both there from the beginning of the season. As far as a harder path, listen, Kansas City, number 1 seed, bad weather, they're used to it. But if they get Buffalo, Buffalo's used to bad weather. If they get Baltimore, Baltimore plays in cold weather as well. So the weather really isn't going to be a situation. It's a dome in Detroit. You look at Detroit and you look at the top teams there. They're playing Washington, and then it's Philly and the Rams. Philly has a great roster, but they just can't seem to get the offense going. They're relying on their defense right now. So I as weird as it is to say, I would look at Detroit with the easier path, but I almost feel dirty saying that because it's Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs going for 3 in a row.
It is, but to your point, it's the Buffalo and Baltimore-sized elephant in the room. Or not really an elephant. I think it's fully acknowledged that both of these teams right now look like they're primed to take that next step. Both quarterbacks playing exemplary football, and the Kansas City Chiefs have given us that flash of the good stuff at the end of the season, but maybe not consistently there all year. And that, Deb, what you just mentioned is reflected by the odds on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. The Detroit Lions are the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. They're plus 275, followed by the Chiefs at plus 350, and then Eagles, Ravens, Buffalo, kind of reflective of, I think, how odds makers see how difficult that path is going forward. Let me ask you this question, though, because I got asked this yesterday. I was on with Bump and Stacy in Seattle talking to them, and they brought up the legacy questions that become really interesting for all of us, and I think less so for players. But, Dad, when you look at what's coming up right now in this postseason on the AFC side here, and Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs getting ready to try and pull off the three-peat that we talked about and be the first team to do that, and so much history associated with it as Mahomes chases Tom Brady, now in a lot of these all-time conversations about quarterbacks, is who a Super Bowl would do more for at this point in their career, Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, given what's at stake there for Mahomes that I just mentioned all the time. But then on the other side for Lamar Jackson, if he wins the Super Bowl, the stratosphere that catapults him. And now I've seen a lot of hyperbole on Twitter saying, hey, if Lamar Jackson wins the Super Bowl here, is he already a top 10 quarterback all time? I don't know if I'm ready to do that just because, man, it buries so many quarterbacks that we're going to kind of forget with the sands of time. But, Dad, if Lamar Jackson wins the Super Bowl now and wins his third MVP all before 30, you're talking about a guy that skill set wise, based on what we've seen, I think with Patrick Mahomes can start to ignite some of those conversations that we used to have about Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, right? Where Tom Brady had the weight of accomplishment on his side, but Aaron Rodgers and this otherworldly ability. Now you're taking it with Patrick Mahomes, who was the original ability guy and has become the incredible accomplishment guy, and had a quarterback in Lamar Jackson show up who is one of the most uniquely physically gifted quarterbacks on earth and is finally playing the best ball. So of the two of them, Dad, who do you think has the bigger resume boost with a Super Bowl win this season?
Oh, I think it's without question Lamar Jackson. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has already kind of stamped himself in history. I did the Super Bowl for Westwood One, and Kurt Warner was the analyst, and I was being an analyst from the sideline and in the car with him and talking to him all week. He's talking about Mahomes as a Hall of Famer already. I mean, he is in the Hall of Fame already as far as Kurt Warner, a Hall of Famer himself. Lamar Jackson is missing a Super Bowl win on his resume. He's going to win his third MVP. I'm convinced of that. Yeah. I think he's going to win it. I believe there are 5 other players who have at least 3 MVPs, and the one thing they all have, at least a Super Bowl, or in Jim Brown's case, who has 3 MVPs, an NFL championship. He got it before there were Super Bowls. But, you have the Peyton Mannings of the world and the Brett Favres of the world and the Aaron Rodgers of the world and the Tom Brady's of the world who have won at least 3 MVPs, and they all have a NFL championship and or Super Bowl under the belt. Lamar is, I believe, going to get his third this year, join that club, and try to get the Super Bowl. That's where he's faltered. That's where it is for Lamar Jackson. It's kind of like a team, we know you're going to make the playoffs, blah, blah, blah. We go through the regular season. Now, it was a little iffy because Pittsburgh actually held the lead in that division, and we were a little bit surprised at that. And then the last 4 games, they lost their 4, Baltimore won their 4, and ended up winning the division and playing like the team we thought they could be. But we put it on we put wins and losses, and I hate doing that on quarterbacks, but that's what we do. That's what the list is. It's the list of quarterbacks who have won MVPs and won Super Bowls or NFL championships. So, again, the case of Jim Brown, he's a running back. So I think Lamar needs that championship. I do think he needs to take this team, and he certainly can take them to a Super Bowl title to go along with what I believe will be his third MVP. Other than that, it's going to be, hey, he does great in the regular season. Man, he's an unbelievable quarterback, but this is a team game, and the team goal is a Super Bowl, and Pat's raising a few of them over there, and Lamar as an MVP is only raising the MVP trophy and not raising the Lombardi trophy.
I always go back to a line that Chris Canty, who I got to work with at ESPN, Super Bowl champion when he was with the Giants, it always said football at its core is about being at your best when your best is required. And that's in the postseason. And Dad, I'm with you. Quarterback wins are not a stat that I ascribe to. But I think we also have an understanding that not every team's built the same, right? And there are certain teams that have had quarterbacks along for the ride. Late stage Peyton Manning for the Broncos Super Bowl, who was there really in physical form only and not in the same sense that we'd seen him before, versus a guy like Lamar Jackson, who, if they win a Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson is going to be the overwhelming reason why, given his impact on the team. And I do think resume-wise, stacking it up in history, it matters. Ability-wise, Lamar's already there. Like when we power rank quarterbacks going into next season, Dad, it's going to be hard not to go firm Patrick Mahomes number 1 until further notice, and Lamar Jackson sitting there at number 2. Like when you look at him relative to his teammates in Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, it's going to be real hard not to have Lamar Jackson in that firm spot above those two, despite the fact that Joe Burrow also played exemplary football this season. Josh Allen was going toe-to-toe for the MVP, and postseason accomplishment, right, wrong, or indifferent, I think can and should be factored into that when the margins are that close. When we're talking about guys that are so similar in terms of their ability to go out there and impact a game, and you're looking for the edges in the way that we perceive them, I do think postseason performance is one of those edges, and it feels appropriate. So that's the kind of stuff that feels like it's at stake, at least for us. Again, inside these locker rooms, you're insulated from so much of this. None of these guys are actually thinking about their resumes and how they stack up in the future like that.
Right.
They're trying to think about how they can go best out here to serve their team. And at least in the case of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Detroit Lions, they get to do that with the benefit of the 1 seed to try and help them get right and get everyone back for these games. So coming up next, we will take an early look at the divisional round here. And the most important thing, whether you are a bettor, sports talk we do, what's the best sports weekend of the year overall, but in the football season, I especially remember this with our buddy Trey Wingo, who you guys can always see on the pregame power up here at DraftKings, used to always ask, is the divisional round the best weekend in the NFL's calendar? Dad, what say you on that one? As someone that now has like called a bunch of these playoff games, you call on the road and have done the Super Bowl the last couple of years here, is this the best round that we get pound for pound?
Yeah, I think it is. I think because you get 4 games as opposed to 2 in the conference championship. And still, the number 1 seeds coming off their buys. So there's always a question mark of how they're going to play after this. And you brought it up on the break, and I'll let you bring it up now. There's one added caveat to the weekend, which extends to Monday.
Yeah, and this is sort of unfair if we are judging this against other NFL weekends. Because to your point, this is the sweet spot of inventory and quality, where, yeah, we don't have wall to wall the way we did on Wild Card weekend, where you get 3 games and a game on Monday and all this, but you get 4 games that we expect to be high level competition with the teams that we got left. But this year, we also got the College Football Playoff National Championship on Monday. And I just think that 3-day stretch of football, we see all these tweets and stats about how, from a certain point in the year, we won't go the next 55 days without having a football game every day. To go 3 days in a row, including games where we're going to get that Ravens-Bills matchup that we've been looking for here, maybe a red-hot Rams team coming back into the fold, both one seeds like we mentioned, and then you kick it off with Notre Dame and Ohio State on Monday, which I don't know about you, Dad, I'm starting to get nervous about. Like, I have made the mistake of letting myself feel things about football again this season with my team, and so now I am setting up for peak devastation on Monday, but that 3-day stretch seems like it is going to be really hard for anyone to top.
Yeah, listen, that's why I do think you throw in Monday and add it. It's the best football weekend. I guess we could say that because it incorporates college and pro. And yeah, I'm getting excited as well. I can't get there till about 2:30 or 3 o'clock on game day because I'm doing the Ravens-Bills game the night before, where the weather wind chill is going to be about 3 degrees. But it's actually supposed to be cold in Atlanta as well. But at least it's in a dome. But at least I'll be there as a fan, not working. Though a fan, I'll be more nervous as a fan and not having to concentrate on what's going on in the field and calling the game. So that's going to be a different thing. But what a way to end the 5-game weekend of 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and 1 on Monday. But yeah, back to the NFL. I just think the situations of the number 1 seeds playing their first games. So things can still happen. You can still have upsets. You kind of, we saw blowouts in the wild card weekend. Maybe we'll see blowouts. Maybe we won't. You hope we won't. We hope we're going to see really good games. But injuries are certainly a part of it. So again, with the Kansas City, Detroit got to rest for a week. But that's always, attrition is always, it's something you can never put into your prognostications at the beginning of the year. Who's injured, who's not. You can't decide that. And when do they get injured? You get injured early and you're healthy by the middle of the season. You get hurt late in the season and you're out. You get hurt in a playoff game like Nakobe Dean does for Philadelphia, and now you're out for the playoffs. I mean, that's a devastating thing to lose somebody the week before the divisional round.
And you can't account for which teams have built such a strong culture and overcome so many injuries, cough, cough, Detroit Lions, cough, cough, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, that you can never count them out in any situation they find themselves in. But I digress here. Dad, I'll tell you someone who does agree that the divisional round is the best round in all of the NFL. And that would be the Kansas City Chiefs. Since Patrick Mahomes took over as a starter, the Chiefs are 6-0 in the divisional round. It is the most wins without any loss in any playoff round in NFL history. So this is a round that they've owned. And Dad, to your point about blowouts, you're seeing the lines right now. Really only one game expected to be close by odds makers. You look Baltimore and Buffalo. Baltimore Ravens, a 1.5-point road favorite in this game. Everyone else, the Eagles, a 6-point home favorite. The Lions, a 9.5-point home favorite over the Commanders. The Chiefs, an 8.5-point favorite over a Texans team that they beat by over that number not too long ago at the end of this season. So, Dad, while I think most of these games are going to be better than that. Kansas City has traditionally been a team that's been horrible against the spread this year and played a bunch of close games. Washington can score with anyone. I think that game can be pretty exciting, but it definitely looks like a weekend that could be a little lopsided, at least in some estimations here. But some of the things that you just mentioned, the injury is going to go a long way in this. And I think for Kansas City specifically, coming off that, if we start with them, Chris Jones now looking like he's going to be back and available for this game. Hasn't played since week 15 with a calf injury. And Jalen Watson, their cornerback that's been out since week 7 with a broken ankle, both back in practice, both look like they're trending towards playing there. So, Dad, how big of an impact does Chris Jones make just by being on the field, even if he's not 100% for the Kansas City defense?
Oh, I mean, he makes such an impact whether he's playing inside or outside. I mean, he is the game wrecker. He is that's what Jalen Carter has been doing for Philadelphia, especially on the interior of that defensive line. That's what Chris Jones does. Chris Jones plays in the opposing team's backfield. So he's huge for this game. And obviously, again, he's had the extra rest. But they seem to be in pretty good shape now. Again, they have to list all their injuries, and the Chiefs have a number of players on the injury list, but if a guy gets treatment, he has to be on the list. I don't think any of these injuries are detrimental to the point of not playing in the game.
I think the most interesting situation, and again, Andrew Whitworth is going to join us here off the top of the hour in the 9 o'clock hour. I want to know what he would do with the left tackle situation, because Joe Thuney played left tackle the last time they played the Houston Texans late in the season, when this team all of a sudden started to look more stabilized. You had DJ Humphries come in and play week 18 and get some snaps in there, as he had been dealing with injury since coming over to this team. Like, what do you do in that spot, Dad? Part of me says if it ain't broke, don't fix it, man. Like, I understand Joe is more limited in the skill set, but the way the Chiefs organized their game plan and the comfort there seemed to be from their quarterback with Joe Thuney out at left tackle was noticeable. It was a noticeable uptick. And I understand, hey, you don't want to make two positions worse. You want to give Joe Thuney an opportunity to go and be the all-pro guard that he's always been. But, man, it's really hard for me to look away from the results that you got when Joe Thuney was out there. So if DJ Humphries is fully healthy, you probably slot him back in there. I think you try and operate game plan-wise closer to what you did with Joe Thuney, and you move him back in at guard and know, hey, we can hit that button if we need to. But at the end of the day, having your best players play their best position is probably in everyone's best interest. But Witt's a guy that played on the edge for a long time and has a ton of experience in that area. So I'll be very curious to see what he has to say on that front for a team that, hey, when they're healthy and now with Hollywood Brown back, looks to be a completely different animal. And on the other side, Dad, for the Houston Texans, going to be dealing with some injuries in their offensive line. It doesn't look like Shaq Mason is going to be in position to go. He was a limited participant, but it seems like he's trending towards a no. And his backup, Juice Scruggs, also has been dealing with an injury. So that Houston offensive line's been kind of the liability for them most of this season. And you worry about that against one of the best defensive game plan designers in postseason history in Spags.
Oh, yeah, you absolutely do. And it was, the Texans put up 32, but it's the defense that really kept that Chargers offense down. And that's what I think they're going to be led by again, or need to be led by again, which brings up the question of, do you put DJ Humphrey at left tackle or leave Thuney out there? Because you have Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, who had, 11 and 12 sacks in the regular season, a ton of pressures. I mean, they have some excellent edge rushers out there. I'm almost with you. It will be interesting to talk to Whit about it. Is, it got pretty comfortable with Thuney. He has really taken to the left tackle position. Obviously, he'd go back to guard next year. But do you just leave it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it right now. Or do you slot him back into left guard and put DJ out there? And obviously it's on the health of Humphries and how comfortable they are with him. I think I did the first game when he came over to Kansas City, and he pulled a hammy in that game, which isn't shocking because he hadn't played in a long time. So he's been dealing with that. So that's the thing. I mean, the best part of the Texans team is their edge rushers, and that's the position you have to deal with for Kansas City.
It is somewhat shocking that he pulled the hamstring, and that we've got him and Kevin Zeitler, two offensive linemen in the playoffs, both having hamstring injuries listed on the injury report. Because as our friend Mark Schlereth always pointed out, when you're an offensive lineman, you don't have a hamstring, you have a ham cord, and you're hardly ever moving fast enough to actually tweak that thing. So impressive that we've got two of them in this round here. Dad, sticking on the AFC side before we get to the NFC side, I think the other two big injuries to keep an eye on here, Zay Flowers was a DNP yesterday at practice here, the Ravens star wide receiver who, they shifted. They were able to do things out of their two tight end sets with Likely and Mark Andrews, who are awesome players, against a Steelers team that got a few big plays at the end, but was not really in position to go out there and affect them as well. Zay Flowers unlocks such an explosive level of that Ravens offense that I do worry more about that in a game like this against Buffalo if they don't have him. And on the other side, we spent the other day lauding Buffalo Bills offensive line with praise. Alec Anderson, their extra offensive lineman, day-to-day with a calf injury and a limited participant the other day here. And we said Buffalo, more extra offensive line sets than anyone in the NFL and more successful with it than anyone in the NFL. So certainly one to monitor for them, but I think pales in comparison to what Zay Flowers represents to that Baltimore team. Yeah,
obviously they didn't need Zay Flowers in the game against Pittsburgh, but this is a different animal. in playing Buffalo. And Zay Flowers not only can go deep and take the top off of defense, he's the motion guy. He's the guy that you can read a defense off of what pre-snap look you're going to get with his motion, because he's such a threat. Now, They can with Bateman, obviously they do well, but the two tight ends of Andrews and Likely, they are stoked there. They bring in Charlie Kohler, the third tight end, when they're going to run the ball, and they obviously have Derrick Henry, but they need Zay Flowers to go where they want to go. We keep talking about Lamar Jackson, but they need Zay to be able to get to where they want to go. And you maybe you ask the question, is it much like Detroit needing David Montgomery back? Who looks like he's back from a knee injury, though Jahmyr Gibbs really picked up the slack incredibly well.
Yeah.
I mean, he was averaging.
Need is a relative term there.
Yes. When Montgomery was out, Gibbs was averaging 25, 26 touches a game and killing it. So even if Montgomery isn't 100% and they use him situationally, I still think that offense is in fine shape because Gibbs has been able to carry the load.
Yeah, I would agree. Quite honestly, I do think one of the most impactful injuries for that team is going to end up being Kevin Zeitler, who it sounds like was working out with the trainers on the side and is trending towards a positive direction. But that Detroit line, when it's healthy, one of the best in the NFL. And if you get any cracks in that foundation, especially for a Washington team on the other side, whose best players are in that defensive tackle room. Now, when you look there, I think you've been dealing with Deron Payne, was a limited participant dealing with that finger injury that we saw him get in the wild card round, but still, that's bad out of hell inside there. And so if you're less than your best there, certainly one to keep an eye on there. Dad, you already mentioned it for the Eagles on the NFC side and sticking there. Nakobe Dean, huge one for that linebacker room in Philadelphia, and going to be a really interesting one to watch in that matchup against the Rams. Now, the Rams could also be without Tyler Higbee dealing with that chest injury. He was a limited participant, apparently was coughing up blood in that last game that he was ultimately ruled out of. So him and Kella Witherspoon is the other one to keep an eye out. Was an awesome impact player in the secondary for the Rams. Was a DMP with a thigh injury on Wednesday. But those are the ones to keep an eye on. But, Dad, I think that Nakobe Dean injury for Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, who came out with a great custom game plan to go and defeat that Brian Flores-led defense for Minnesota, how they go about attacking the Eagles at the linebacker level, who that was the place that people went for a win last year. And Zach Bond changed a lot of that. Nakobe Dean changed a lot of that. We saw what Oren Burks going in there as the backup did mid-game. How Vic Fangio is able to cover that up against this offense is going to go a long way in this one.
Yeah, the Rams, to me, have just been an enigma on offense. Taking out Week 18 against Seattle. As I said, Week 17, they scored 13 points in a win. Week 16, they scored 19 points in a win. Week 15, they scored 12 points in a win. And they had their full complement of weapons on offense. And they put up 27 against the Vikings, and that was largely the defense just knocking the crap out of Sam Darnold with 9 sacks. So I'm somewhat concerned about the offensive firepower from the Rams, given their full complement of guys that are healthy enough to be out on the field playing.
Yeah, it's man, they are the ultimate boom or bust team right now. That's what we said. They are the team that nobody wanted to play come the postseason on the NFC.
You guys, and the coaches rumor mill is churning, fellas, okay? With Mike Vrabel already off the board, all eyes are turning towards offensive wizard Ben Johnson. He's going to have his fair share of teams to make a choice from, but Adam Schefter had some interesting thoughts on how the Raiders might be factoring into all of this.
Ben Johnson's going to be a head coach. Ben Johnson has earned that right. But if he takes the Raiders' job, he's now going to a division where the head coaches are Andy Reid, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh, and the quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, and Justin Herbert. And you're going to a team that doesn't even have a quarterback, doesn't have a draft pick to go land a quarterback, and has to find a way somehow to get a quarterback. So good luck with that.
So Shefty's basically like, hey, man, you don't want this job? Like, he just threw a bunch of cold water on the Raiders job? I mean, okay, thank you.
I mean, my man Shefty is sick and tired of hearing people try and entertain the notion that, in theory, the best coaching candidate on the board right now, at least in most people's estimation, would entertain a job with all of those pitfalls just because Tom Brady paid him a phone call. And, Dad, it's probably a good, healthy checkup from the neck up that Raiders fans, and we talked to Jason Fitz earlier in the week here, he understands exactly where they sit in the pecking order right now and how that job is in no way desirable based on all those things that Shefty lined out. So I would hope that there aren't Raiders fans out there that have deluded themselves into the idea that Ben Johnson would actually take that job. But as you always point out, fan is short for fanatic. So who knows what people in desperate times could convince themselves of.
I mean, listen, the best head coaching candidate is not going to the Jets and not going to the Raiders, right? There are two organizations that are poorly run, that don't have an offense and don't have a quarterback. And that's something a new head coach, especially Ben Johnson, an offensive head coach, is going to want. He's a guy that's going to have his pick of jobs. And listen, the Bears is certainly one that where you have a young quarterback, but you're in a tough decision. Or tough division, I mean, as well. But yeah, to think that the number one new coach, because Vrabel, I thought, was probably the number one option out there. The number one option for a new coach, a first-time head coach, is easily Ben Johnson. And Aaron Glenn is coming up the ladder as well. It's going to be like the Eagles a couple of years ago, losing Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon in one fell swoop, with Detroit possibly losing both their coordinators. So that's something that, they'll gladly deal with if it's off of a Super Bowl win.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that does put a lot of added pressure on them, though, because, I mean, their offensive line coach, Hank Fraley, is a guy whose name's getting bantered about more and more, I think, for offensive coordinator potential going forward. And, who knows if maybe the Detroit Lions would do that internally if Ben Johnson left and just keep the connective tissue. I do like the idea, though, Dad, that Ben Johnson has hung out with Dan Campbell for so long and has embraced sicko mode. I mean, Dan Campbell took over a Detroit Lions team that was a perennial loser, that's in a division now that we look at in the NFC North as one of the toughest in football, and has turned them into a winner. Like, relish the ultimate challenge. I like the idea that Ben Johnson, who has been incredibly picky about where his first head coaching opportunity is going to come from, would look and actually judge these based off of how unlikely is success here, because I want the ultimate challenge, because I was raised in the fires of Dan Campbell, and that is all we know. We do not want the easy path forward. We want to go be sickos, because the other part of that, Dad, is, and a pretty hilarious thing to think about, is Ben Johnson gets linked most commonly to the Caleb Williams-led Chicago Bears. And if you were to do that, if you're Ben Johnson, you're signing up to stay in division with a guy in Dan Campbell who you know incredibly well, and you see what he's built there. And that's a daunting task. We saw Kevin O'Connell against Sean McVay, student versus teacher, in the wild card round, and Kevin O'Connell did not have a great time. And so that is an interesting factor. It doesn't trump having to go up against Patrick Mahomes. But, Jesse, it does make it interesting, as we do hear from Caleb Williams now, as he went on and joined the St. Brown brothers on their podcast, talking about what he's looking for in a head coach and addressing the Ben Johnson-sized elephant in that room.
Yeah, he gave his bare necessities, if you will. I can't. Just listen to this.
No.
Roll the tape. Roll the tape.
Roll the tape.
Selfishly, I want an offensive-minded guy, so I can build with him and be with that coach for the next 19, 17, 15 years, and so I can also learn and grow and things like that from him and what he's seen and what he's gone through with maybe other QBs or been around. So that's selfishly.
So selfishly, what he wants, probably what every young quarterback wants, basically.
Yeah, well, and it's also funny as he is saying that to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who he is talking about exactly what Amon-Ra St. Brown has in his offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. And those guys have all kind of done the funny thing. I think Josh Allen did it too when he was talking about Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator. When he was asked what he does for the team, he said, nothing. Joe's a terrible coach. No one should come after him. Amon-Ra kind of played the same card here. But, Dad, at this point, I would be stunned if Ben Johnson is not the next coach of the Chicago Bears. And I think, to your point, it is going to be a coaching cycle that takes a while to have a lot of these jobs filled, because I do think Aaron Glenn is right behind him in terms of desirability. And for some people could be ahead, like Aaron Glenn going and making, chicken salad out of matchsticks and gunpowder and whatever he had left on the defensive side of the ball has been an exemplary storyline in the back half of the season. But either way, that's going to take until these guys get done with their season. And if the Lions are a team that can make it to the Super Bowl, now all of a sudden you're talking about all these teams having to sit around and wait and put headlines out. If you're, the Cowboys about wanting to sign Deion Sanders, or the Bears putting out headlines about wanting to potentially interview Marcus Freeman, like all of this is going to happen because I think the candidates that people are really pushing to sign are going to be sitting around here getting ready to play on Super Bowl Sunday when it's all said and done.
Yeah, Johnson has interviewed virtually with the Bears, the Raiders, the Patriots, and Jacksonville during the bye week. So, and that's all he was allowed to do was do it virtually. And I think Tom Brady has his game on Saturday, and he doesn't know if he's allowed to have contact with Tom Brady about the situation, because Tom Brady being a part owner of the Raiders, but he said obviously his main focus is the game. I agree.
Can I just say by the way on that, it is hilarious that Tom Brady for years was associated with the New England Patriots team that went above and beyond in pushing the Lions on competition and finding that edge here, and obviously had the Deflategate and the Spygate and all these different cheating and impropriety things in here. There were years where people wondered, with Tom Brady and his contract taking less, was there ways that they were offsetting that? And now, excuse me, that's a fine. He immediately, in the next phase of his career, goes into a role full of gray area where you could again look at this as impropriety or trying to skate tampering or all these things. Like Tom Brady is addicted to the line. We talk about line steppers all the time. There is no one more addicted to stepping on the line than Thomas Edward Patrick Brady.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And if you actually look at the teams that are left, the Jets, the Saints, the Bears, Jacksonville, and Vegas, or I should say Vegas and Dallas, probably has the best team, right? The most ready team if they get the right parts in the offseason to make a move, because they have a veteran quarterback who is there. But Jerry Jones always tries to make a splash in hiring, talking to Deion Sanders. The name Kellen Moore, former Cowboy. The name Jason Witten, former Cowboy. He's going to try and make some sort of splash. I don't think
only
he'll
the first one of those qualifies as a splash. Like Deion Sanders is a splash, and this is no disrespect to. Well, Jason Witten would be a surprise. I don't know if Cowboys would consider that a splash in the same way. And Kellen Moore, to me, Dad, is the one that seems most expected of those three.
Yes, I guess I should say it as Deion would be a splash, but the others would be former Cowboys is where he would go.
Yes.
In Kellen Moore and in Jason Witten, guys who had played for the organization. I don't think Ben Johnson will be part of that. I think Ben, I agree. I think he's going to be locked into Chicago, where you're dealing with your former team in Detroit. You're dealing with Minnesota, a team that won 14 games, but all of a sudden there's a bit of a head scratcher at the quarterback position, the way Sam Darnold finished, and your number one pick coming off a knee injury. And certainly Jordan Love with the Green Bay Packers are looking to be, in the game for the coming year. So he's certainly in a tough division to go there. But I do think, and you're right, the Bears may have to wait for as long as Detroit is playing. They may have to wait. And the thought of not getting him, if you're going to try, and that's the thing, if you're waiting for him, the longer he plays, and if there's multiple teams waiting for him, someone ain't getting him. So, I mean, are others being signed along the way? You kind of take that chance.
And that's why I think a lot of people, I don't know, looking at the Cowboys situation that you brought up, like it's the low-hanging fruit of this cycle. And the Deion Sanders thing, the more and more I sit with it, Dad, does just feel like a clever diversion tactic. And that's not a disrespect to Deion Sanders at all. I just don't actually trust that Jerry Jones, for all of the financial reasons that we've talked about with this, paying buyouts in a way that has not traditionally been something that he's done, would that be an indication of a lack of commitment to Dak Prescott at quarterback that would cost them $100 million of dead cap money next year? Like all these things that are just antithetical to Jerry Jones, the businessman that we have seen here as of late operating for this Cowboys team. It just reeks like, oh, this is a fun thing to do because Jerry really likes attention, doesn't want people dogging him for missing the interview window with all the good coordinators and candidates. And for the end of this, if he went up and signed Kellen Moore to bring back home a guy that was there with Mike McCarthy for a little bit, that a lot of people, when Kellen Moore was the hot name on the street, were wondering, hey, would they just fire Mike McCarthy so they don't let Kellen get out of the building because he is one of their guys here in a way that we know Jerry values. And now he's gone over. And Dad, I think Kellen Moore, like the fire is cooled on that a bit. Like this Eagles season, no doubt, has been an improvement over last year where, hey, the charge last year was we didn't have answers for the blitz. We weren't doing all these things. Kellen Moore, who's known to be the passing guy and the guy who maybe did a little bit too much for a time, has simplified the equation a lot around Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia, but it's certainly led to him not being the name that's at the top of everybody's list outside of the Dallas Cowboys now, who are the only team I've really seen name him in this regard.
Yeah, and quite honestly, it's to bring in a Kellen Moore is also to bring in a guy who was a Cowboy, but probably more important for Jerry and Steven, a guy that they can control, right? A guy that's not going to make waves, a guy that's not going to want any kind of power. He's just going to come in and be the head coach. I mean, that's something that Jerry looks for as well, is someone who is not going to rock the boat as a head coach and let him run the team, of which he has struggled in running the team. But that's the kind of coach they want. And I do think, I don't think a lot of teams are clamoring for Kellen Moore, but I do think he is a fit for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think that's, well, and it's going to be an option potentially. Now, that's another one, though. Like we say, like, oh, that'd be their easy out there. But, Kellen Moore will have fewer suitors, but that's a Philadelphia Eagles team that could go just as far, if not farther, than any of the other teams that we've talked about based on their accomplishments. So they'd be waiting a while for him. It's all going to be interesting. I feel like in the midst of all of this, because Jerry Jones is the consummate showman and he's always going to make sure the Cowboys get talked about, and Caleb Williams is the belle of the ball, and Tom Brady is out there in Las Vegas, that we are forgetting, like, the Jacksonville Jaguars just sitting there with a quarterback in Trevor Lawrence that's certainly more desirable than anything they've got out in Las Vegas. You hit on Brian Thomas Jr. in this last draft. Like, it's not a perfect job, and you're saddled with Trent Baalke, who people inexplicably keep pointing out retaining that job as GM despite the litany of failures under his watch and resume there. I do think that job is ultimately going to be one I'm probably most interested in, Dad, just because I still maintain that fascination with Trevor Lawrence as someone that loved him coming out of college and believes and sees a lot of ability there. Can you get him to a situation? He's always, Dad, felt spiritually connected. I've always said that he feels like if you gave Justin Herbert a gummy and just said, relax a little bit, and the hair relaxed a little bit here, and the play style was a little bit looser here. And so the talent that exists in both of them, we saw weaponized by the Los Angeles Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. If you get another quality coach in there in Jacksonville, can we get the best of what you've got with Trevor Lawrence that we really haven't seen so far yet?
You just keep hoping with Jacksonville, right? That you have your quarterback, that you paid your quarterback, that you can build enough around your quarterback and have your quarterback play well enough to lead this team in, again, a division that's not a great division. And the other thing about being the head coach of Jacksonville, you got to make sure you have your passport ready.
Andrew Whitworth, former NFL offensive tackle, Super Bowl champion, and national champion with the LSU Tigers here, in a little bit about what we got ready to come up with the NFL postseason here. And Dad, I was just sitting here, looking at Whit's resume here, realizing he's been a champion at all levels here. And I had to go back and try and do the quick math of which Super Bowl he won because of these damn Roman numerals. And I feel like every year this is the same rant I go on as we get towards the Super Bowl, where I don't know why the NFL decided they were going to be the last bastion for this. Like, outside of suffixes on the end of names of kids further down the lineage who've all been given the same names here, who else is doing Roman numerals in 2025 on a consistent basis besides the NFL? Who in the league office way back in the day decided this was the place that they wanted to go to try and challenge me? Like, I don't know, Jesse, Dad, are either of you bad at Roman? Like, are you guys good at this? Because every time I do this, I have to spend extra time going through either in my head or online trying to figure out which freaking Super Bowl we're on.
Yeah, just Google it. What number Super Bowl is this in numbers? Like, what? Yeah, exactly. Why are we doing Roman numerals? I can't read those. I can't do it.
The thing that gets me is when you start to put the Roman numeral in front of the other Roman numeral to subtract. like
Yes.
XL, like is 40. Like L is 50, but you put the X in front of the L to make it 40. And then the L to show that it's 10 less than 50, and then the V after it for 5. So for 45, it's XLV. So that's my issue, is the letters before the smaller ones, before the bigger ones, to subtract. Because the regular addition of them is I can do. But yeah, it's a subtracting. You have to do a quick double take. But yeah, I don't know why they just don't use a number either. I don't know whose idea it was of why not just use a number. They think Roman numerals look cooler. I think not.
I will say this. They objectively look cooler. Like, there is no disputing that in my mind here. But we also apparently left looking cool in the past. Like, you go back and look at the old Super Bowl decals. Remember the banners they used to have put up around the stadiums for all that, and how great it looked. And now we just do the laziest version of it possible, where it's just the numbers and maybe a little bit of coloring on the outside. We're losing recipes when it comes to that. The league office needs to put more of their time and bandwidth on making those cool again, and not just on confusing me with Roman numerals.
Okay, so I'm reading here that it says the idea came from late Chiefs owner Lamar Hunt, because the Roman numerals are used to avoid any confusion that could happen, since the championship win is recognized the year the season started and not the year in which it ended.
I mean, listen, I understand that in theory, because that is also confusing at times. But again, why not just say Super Bowl I, Super Bowl II, Super Bowl III, without any of the numerals involved? You can accomplish the same idea without the funny numbers.
It also says Lamar Hunt thought the Roman numerals would add to the game's prestige, and he liked the idea of Roman numerals because they conjured images of gladiators in battle.
It does. Now that line is true.
Okay.
That line is absolutely true.
Yes.
So I would agree with that. Not mixing up the seasons because it's the 22 season, but the 23 Super Bowl. Yeah, that doesn't come into play when you're just using numbers. If you started with 1, 2, and so on. But again, the number 44, XLIV. I mean, 10 X before L for 40, I before V for 4. I mean, it can get confusing. It can get confusing.
Yeah.
It's gotten confusing. Now, what's even more embarrassing, though, is the reason that I was looking this up with Whit, not was to, have a resume to introduce him with or anything like that, but because I wanted to ask him if he would make the same gamble. Knowing what he knows now, a man who has been to the mountaintop both in college and in the NFL, has won a national championship at LSU, has won a Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams, something that has evaded both of us, Dad, me on the college level and you on the NFL level throughout our entire lifetime. He has tasted from the cup and knows what it's like to get to that point. Would it be worth his penis is what I would want to know, because the Reddit post has gone viral now in the lead up to the national championship. We have to talk about this. We were off yesterday. Everyone else talked about it here. It's our school in the national championship. And I've got to know, there was a Reddit poster that put out there, and it was, for anyone that missed it, this is the post. Hello, fellow degenerates. As many of you are aware, 2 months ago, I made a bet that I would chop off my humongous ding-dong if the Notre Dame Fighting Irish won the college football playoff. Great self-promotion there. I just want to make it very clear that if ND wins the national championship, I will firmly stick, to my word and receive a professional surgery that will safely remove my penis. The timeline for this, though, will have to be flexible, as I do have to consider my wife, who would like to have at least 2 children. In the event that I have to follow through with my bet, she's agreed to accelerate our family planning so I can get the surgery as soon as possible. I refuse to let my team be cursed, and if that means that I lose my bleep in the process, then so be it. I can't believe I'm saying this. Go Buckeyes. Dad, I love Notre Dame more than I love most things in this life here. I thought about what Notre Dame winning a national championship would look and feel like the other day, me being there in person to watch, and I had legitimate tears in my eyes. Like, I love this school so much. And if you told me, guaranteed me, they would win the national championship on Monday if I agreed to this same bet, I wouldn't do it. I love you, Notre Dame. I do not love you penis much. And that is just not a bridge that I can go across here. Dad, have you ever heard of anything like this? And would you be surprised if this guy actually went through with this?
Yes, I would be surprised if he went through it. I mean, we've seen ridiculous bets that people well shot of, right? I'll walk across the United States if this happens, and it happens, and they're like, well, hey, I'm not going to do it. I mean, who's going to say anything if this guy says, you know what, I'm not going to cut my ding-dong off? I'm just not going to do it. And quite honestly, his wife is fine with it as long as he gives her 2 children first. that Jesse doesn't say a lot about their love life if she's willing to part with that thing after they get 2 kids.
I mean,
that's not like a wife saying, no, don't do that. No. I mean, that's someone who's like, okay, so we don't do it after we have 2 kids. I'm cool with that.
Senior, his wife doesn't know anything about this because this is an anonymous person on Reddit saying that they're going to do this, and they're absolutely not. Just like you said, this is completely fake. And the wife knows nothing about this, and he's saying all this stuff. And again, anonymous person on Reddit. It's not like people are going to be able to find him and pull his pants down and find out if he went through with it. So I think he's safe here. Also, I feel like there's a far cry, not that you would do this anyway, but okay, we're talking about Notre Dame winning a national championship now, Gojo, and you're saying you would not give up your manhood for it. But if you could go back in time and win that game when you were a player and win a national championship, would you give up a ball? Like 1 ball. I'm not asking for your whole penis, just a ball.
You could have one of those in a heartbeat to win the national champ. I wouldn't even. I'd lop it off on the table for you. I wouldn't even have to think twice about that. Forget safe surgery. We can cauterize the wound when I'm done if it means that I got the poison. What, Dad? You wouldn't have done that?
Senior, would you have given up 1 ball to win
just one
a championship with the Eagles?
No.
1 ball.
No.
What? You have 2.
No.
Right?
Listen, there's 2 for a reason. Okay? There's two for a reason.
What's the reason?
Aesthetic.
I'm not just gonna.
Hey, you tell me the reason. If you can tell me the reason why we have 2, then I will count as justification.
I'm not a doctor. I'll ask my son-in-law Ben, who is going to be a doctor. I don't know, but there are things in our bodies. Do you think they're just arbitrarily there? That they aren't there for some function?
Seem pretty useless. So I mean, yeah.
Jesse.
I mean, what is it? Is it the spleen that, at this point, we could kind of be born without at this point? Isn't there one of those organs that gets removed all the time that's basically useless now, through the sands of time?
Yeah, your appendix.
Let's put it this way, Dad.
Yeah.
The things in my body, I'm keeping in my body. Okay? Because life goes on a lot longer than football. I played football till I'm 32. I've lived 30 more years since then, and I would not have liked to have done that with 1 ball. Okay? No.
So wait a minute. This is the same man. I want to paint this picture for you guys because my dad loved this hypothetical situation. Dad, who was it? Was it Ricky Waters that cut off his pinky to stay in the game?
Ronnie Lott,
excuse me. Yeah, my beg your pardon. Ronnie Lott, famous for having a portion of his pinky amputated so that he could go back out and play in a game. And Dad always used to bring that up. When me and my brother were kids and we were first getting started with football, he loved growing us with the situation of if you guys were only given the opportunity, he said you had to cut off a piece of your pinky, you could go back out there and play with your teammates.
Yes.
Would you do it?
Yes.
And we both sat there and
yes.
we're like, yeah, absolutely. God gave you 2 pinkies and you want to go and nub one of them up to go and stay in 1 game, but you won't give me 1 testicle to win the Super Bowl.
A, it's not internally in my body. Things are inside your body for a reason. And B, it's a piece of your finger. It's like from the top knuckle up that he had removed.
Oh, so you're fine with just the tip, but a ball not going to work.
Yes, just the tip.
Okay.
Yes, just the tip.
All right.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely. I'm keeping both balls. I'll give up a tip of my pinky. Okay? Is what I'll do. Yes. There are limits to what I'll give up for a national championship or a Super Bowl. Ball or Super Bowl? Super Bowl.
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. You're not taking anything inside my body.
Okay.
I would have it gilded and I would have it on the mantle right next to the shadow box that had my national championship. I might put them in the same box here because both of them would have given and sacrificed what they needed to make that. Dad, I am stunned here. I thought you were actually someone that was about the team, that wanted a championship, that wanted to go out there and persevere and would sacrifice literally my entire life now. All the things that I thought I believed that I was taught by you, I am calling into question because the level of dedication I thought my father had to his craft is now something that I have to question for the first time in my life.
What are you talking about? Playing with injury, done that, would cut off part of my pinky, would absolutely do that. Because I wouldn't give up a ball? You're questioning my manhood when you want to take some of my manhood? No. And by the way, Jesse, I agree with you. There's no way this guy is cutting off his ding-dong. There is no way.
No way.
He is
and
having
there's
that
no
removed.
way it's huge either. That was just,
no.
yeah. There's no way.
If you got to say it, my brother in Christ, you ain't got it like that.
Yeah.
But Jesse, I don't know. Just because we tracked down and found that dude that ended up shoving the burrito up his butt for the Florida State team when he made those claims, and I just saw some anonymous Twitter guy get bumped off a jury because he called the assistant district attorney hot on Twitter, and lawyer Reddit found out about that and got him up out of the paint on that. I don't question the power of the internet, especially the power of Reddit, to hold people accountable. That is a platform that I have the utmost fear and respect for, because those people are our foremost sleuths. Obviously, you have talked about before, motivated women who are friends with a woman who's going through something can find an incredible amount of information in a heartbeat. It is the real hold my beer when it comes to that positioned against Reddit, who I think is the final boss of modern sleuthing in 2025.
They could find him, but again, it's congrats, you found me, but I'm not going to do it. Also, find me a doctor who would do this to somebody.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to lose your medical license.
I guess for the right amount of money, you'd maybe,
it might be a doctor out of the country. Like, you may have to go abroad for this.
He's going to Turkey for this.
A, there's no way he's doing this. B, there's no way I would do this or you would do this, Mike. And C, we differ at a ball. We differ. I'm
the
just
line is drawn.
not giving it up.
Right there.
Not doing it.
At GoJo and Golic on Twitter, what would you give up for your team to ultimately lift a trophy? And if you want to say, if you were a former player for your team specifically to have played on that, because to Jesse's point, I do think it is different. I probably wouldn't give up the same appendage for this Notre Dame team to win a national championship as it would be for me. Because as happy as I'm going to be right now here, I'll tell the story on Monday about how tantalizingly close in so many ways I got to in my mind winning the title here, and an image and a video that will haunt me forever from the lead up to that game in ways that I barely talk about, because again, it is one of those things that is so clear in my mind what I could have almost had we won that game, that I will never forget it. And that's why I am so passionate about the testicle in this particular instance, but I digress on that. Coming up next, we will take a look at a couple of college players who aren't thankfully going to have to make this decision when it comes to their future here. But do have a very Mike Golic Sr. here. And as we inch closer to the divisional round coming up this weekend in the NFL, we're excited to visit with our next guest here, former NFL offensive tackle, Super Bowl champion Andrew Whitworth. Kind enough to join us. You guys see him on the Amazon Prime on NFL Desk on Thursday nights. You can also check out new podcast, Fitz and Wit, wherever you get your podcasts here with him and, of course, Ryan Fitzmagic himself here. Wit, what's going on, man? How you doing?
All is good, brother. Unfortunately, our season came to an end for NFL on Prime, so I got not much to do now, man. I'm in that off-season mode of working myself back in the house, trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the next couple months. But for sure, watching some football this weekend.
Yeah, always interesting finishing up the season either as a player or as a broadcaster now, reintroducing yourself to the family and your role in the situation a little bit there, no doubt. And we want to talk to you about some of that football coming up this weekend here. And I hate that I have to bring you in on this note here because it's the dumbest possible thing we could ask you. But as someone who has experienced a championship at all levels of football, you were a national champion at LSU, you were a Super Bowl champion with the Los Angeles Rams. You know the answer to the test here, so I'm curious if you'll believe that this is worth it. There was a Reddit poster a while back that posted that he would cut off his member if Notre Dame football won a national championship, and it led us to a discussion about if it meant that you would win a championship and you had not won one before, would you be willing to part ways with a single ball in order to accomplish that championship? You have won the championships already. You know what that feels like. So knowing what you know, would you have made that deal with the devil in order to get there?
I don't think I'm cutting anything off for a championship. That's for sure. I've enjoyed every single one of them. They've all been amazing. I'm going to keep all my members of my body, and just try to find a way to get back, work hard, get myself back in that moment and win it outright.
Would you would you go, and I agree, I'm not taking away anything that's inside my body, but I may go the route of Ronnie Lott. Would you go the route of Ronnie Lott and lose the tip of your pinky to continue to play?
I think that one might happen. I mean, that one maybe. That one's on the table for sure. I just would rather there's a possible way we could work it out without losing any body parts. I want to start there.
I want to explore all possible avenues to keep everything attached, and then we'll work through the rest as we need to. All right, well, with that in mind, let's talk about people who have kept their body parts attached and who are going to try to get to the mountaintop that you once got to with the Los Angeles Rams here. And I've been dying to ask you this, Whit, as we get ready now, the 1 seeds are going to be back in the dance, and the Kansas City Chiefs are going to try and go and win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. And one of the biggest questions has been about their offensive line this season. And heading into this game, we have heard from Andy Reid. They are giving reps to both DJ Humphries and Joe Thuney at left tackle. We saw Joe kick out there at the end of the regular season and kind of stabilize things. If all things are equal in your mind, as someone that manned the helm at that tackle position for a lot of really good teams, what are you doing there? Are you putting DJ Humphries back into that lineup, or are you letting Joe Thuney go out there and maintain what they've done down the home stretch?
Only because of DJ Humphries, just the number of snaps that he's had in his career. I feel comfortable if he's healthy and he feels good. I think that's where you start, because to me, you can help tackles. You can find ways in the game to work in the plan to give them a little assistance, especially against this Houston Texans group. But what's really the issue to me is that if you look at this Texans group, it's not going to be just edge rushers. You're going to have guys in the interior that cause a lot of trouble too, and we saw that in their last game. And so to me, the Chiefs really need to think about what has been the biggest part of Mahomes' success. Those 3 guys in the middle of the last few years are one of the best interior 3s in the entire NFL, and keeping that interior solid and strong for him, where he knows he can trust himself inside that pocket and let him kind of move and manipulate as he needs. I think DJ Humphries can get in there, do a good enough job to really Mahomes be able to do what he needs to do. If that solid core in the interior is good and you don't allow him to tack you there, I think you're in a good spot. But when you sometimes slot a guy out, Joe's done an amazing job, but these 2 edge rushers are really special. I mean, this isn't just any week in the NFL for them. So I think that you really want to leave him in his natural spot and play well in the interior would be the goal in this game to me.
So let me take it one step further, and Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson are the edge rushers that we're talking about. If DJ Humphries, if they start him at left tackle and he struggles, do you move to help first, or do you make the switch and put Thuney back out at left tackle during the game?
Yeah, I would imagine that they're going to start with help. And so I would think that this game will be probably something where Andy Reid eases him in with what he does. And when we say help, every team that looks different, right? There's teams that are going to chip and they're going to run play actions, they're going to run football. And then with Andy Reid, it's usually, hey, the ball's going to get out of Patrick's hands really fast for the very first half of the game, and we're going to get a feel for how we're playing. And so he's going to do everything possible, whether it's screens, perimeter runs, passes, you name it, to get the ball out fast and play quick, and probably get a feel for how DJ's playing. And then as he feels confident, they'll keep moving on. And I think eventually they'll help him first, and then they'll make the move. Because I think once you make the move this time, to me, it's for the rest of the playoffs. And it's probably where you're going. This is going to be the road that we're going to take to get there, because you don't want to keep flipping and flopping offensive linemen. You want to let those guys get continuity and make this run together. I think that's important.
Speaking of getting the ball out quick, I want to talk about a quarterback you know very well, Matthew Stafford, who was ripping that thing against the Minnesota Vikings blitz package in that wild card round win. I saw you out there. It was an incredible scene and a show of support for Los Angeles in Glendale before that game, during that game. But Matthew Stafford, now 18-3 in December, January, and February games with the Los Angeles Rams. Why are him and Sean McVay so effective when it gets to this time of the year?
Yeah, Mr. December. Stafford's been unbelievable in these moments. I really think it's, we got to just continue to remember how special this guy is. I mean, his career in Detroit, he comes to LA, first shot at putting him on a roster that you say, hey, this guy should go be able to win. He wins a Super Bowl. And then over the last couple of years, they've been just absolutely injury riddled in the offensive line in 22. And then last year, we know how that went with injuries. And then they make the run at the end of the season to get themselves in the playoffs, and then lose Higbee in that game. And then this year, more of the same. I mean, the offensive line, most of it's out the entire first half of the season. And he still takes them on a run and gets them in these playoffs. And now they're healthy, hoping to get Higgs back again this week. I think it's going to be big. But yeah, I mean, I just think when you talk about their relationship, you're talking about, in my opinion, one of the best head football coaches in the entire NFL, a leader. And obviously, we all know about his mental, and the guy is really, really special when it comes to putting football plays together. But I say this: people can draw up plays, you can write stuff in the dirt, you can say, hey, this, that, like X's and O's. There's really smart people. Sean McVay has one of the best feels of anybody I've ever been around for, like, when you're in the game as an offensive lineman. We've all been there as a player, as a fan, anything. You're like, man, this game feels like this. They should call this, or they should do this. It's like Sean's already there. When I was playing, I would always be like, man, if we just called this next snap, I'd feel great about it. And sure enough, in the huddle, boom, that's what we're doing. He's always had a feel for his guys. And so when you're talking about somebody who's that rare at that, and then a quarterback who's a Hall of Fame level quarterback, in my opinion, without question, I just think you're going to get these kind of things where when they're healthy, they're going to make runs and they're going to be dangerous.
So we got 8 teams left. What are the top teams with the top offensive lines that are left in the playoffs?
I mean, to me, I've always said this for probably, these quarterbacks, you guys know this. I've been telling Fitz for 8 weeks it was going to be Philly, Detroit at the end of this thing. Now I'm conflicted because the Rams are playing Philly, but I still, 8 weeks ago, I said this because of these 2 teams in the trenches and who they are on both sides of the football. 8 weeks ago, I was like, hey, this is going to be the Eagles, Lions. And Fitz is like, oh, I want to wait till I see the seeding at the end of the season. I was like, I get it. You smart quarterbacks, you don't want to throw incompletions. You're going to take sacks. I understand. You don't ever want to take the chance. I understand. But listen, when I look at these groups, it's real easy for me. The Ravens, Chiefs, Eagles, Lions, those have been the teams that I've been saying are going to be in this thing since the beginning because of how they play up front. Now, the surprise to me, not a surprise, but probably how they've played and how well. The Buffalo Bills, I think up front, man, they have played unbelievable. In this run game, what Aaron Kromer has done with that group, that to me, when I look at those 5, they're the 5 that I go, I'm circling these groups and saying, hey, up front, they can get after people. The Chiefs this year might have been as good in the offensive line, but those other 4 have been really special.
You mentioned those groups there, and the one thing I think of in addition to those great units are just what you mentioned. Aaron Kromer's done a phenomenal job coaching in Buffalo. Jeff Stoutland, obviously renowned for the job that he's done in Philadelphia here. You go on and on down the list. Hank Fraley and the job that he's done with the Detroit Lions. In your estimation, what makes a great offensive line coach? Because I think so much of the league right now is searching every offseason to try and find someone that can come in and mold talent at that position in a way that these guys do. So what in your mind makes the great offensive line coach and why these guys are so special?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, every group is unique. It's much like head coaches in this league. You look at their personalities, their demeanor, and how they handle themselves, then how that marries with their players. And I think it's no different in the offensive line room. But one of the things I love is seeing some of these guys who've played, who've been former guys who get in these rooms and have instant success. I mean, you look at Ryan Wendell in Los Angeles. He came over, he was working with Kromer in Buffalo, obviously learned some things from Aaron Kromer. Obviously had a great career with the Patriots, but comes over and instantly, man, he makes an impact. I mean, you could feel his difference in the offensive line room. And that Rams group has played well, when they've been healthy. And now that they are, that's been a big part of their success. And so to me, when you look in those other groups, the same thing. You got some former guys, you got some guys that have been in the game forever and always been amazing teachers who really just, when you talk to their groups, it's like the vibe, the energy, the communication they have is really, really special. I just think when you look across it, it's not as hard as sometimes we make it, man. That relationship is just as important as anything they teach now, because in this game right now, it's a little different. It's different than when I got in the league, and the relationship and the time you spend together really, really matters. And you see it in these groups that play well.
So when a team makes a deep run, like you guys win the Super Bowl, so you make it to the Super Bowl, how does the structure of practice change each week that you go on as far as practice versus rest?
Well, I mean, I didn't practice ever, Mike, so it doesn't really matter. For the other people, no. Listen, so I have to go before my last couple of years. But yeah, I would say that it stays pretty similar. Other than, like, I know that, when you get into these weeks like the Rams, right? Short week. They played on Monday night. They got to play again on Sunday. I'm sure they adjust, which means probably one of those days is just a walkthrough. But for the most part, you try to keep it as normal as the season was. We want nothing to change. We want everything to be the same, and kind of keep that rhythm the same, going through the playoffs. That's why I think I've always said, after experiencing the Super Bowl my first time in 2018, I can see why a team like the Patriots, who'd been there a bunch, have so much success, because that's really the first week you experience outside of like a Thursday night football game where all of a sudden, it's a full 2 weeks, but then that next week is just chaos. It's not your normal schedule. It's not how you normally do things. All the media, all the other things you do, it's hard to kind of lock into, wait a minute, what's my weekly thing to get into playing for a football game, because you get lost in everything going on around you. And you really got to handle that week well. So, I mean, in the playoffs, for the most part, it all stays similar until you get to that week.
No doubt in that week, an animal unlike any other, one that you and the Rams navigated incredibly well when you guys won it, and someone's going to have to do again this year. Check him out again. We're already looking forward to next season of the NFL on Prime. Check out Fitz and Wit in the meantime. Awesome stuff with you keeping the quarterback in check over there on the podcast. Wit, always appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys. Have a great week.
Thanks, Whit.
You too. And Dad, what he mentioned there, I think, is one of the reasons and one of the things we talked about with Kansas City. No part of this is foreign to them. The core of that roster has so much experience navigating that chaotic week he talked about, navigating the bye week here. And when they get into tight situations in games, it's not novel or special to them. And so all of that means they can keep their blood pressure lower at a time of year where everyone else, for the most part, is scrambling to figure out how they do respond in that situation, while the Chiefs already know that answer.
Yeah, I mean, coaches call Andy Reid to ask how Andy deals with a run to the Super Bowl, as coaches who haven't made runs to the Super Bowl. Like, all my years in the league, I only got past the first round once, only made it to the divisional round one time. And that was my last year in Philly, where we played the Saints. So I never got that to the championship game or to the Super Bowl. That's why I wanted to ask Witter. I'm always jealous of the guys who make it to the Super Bowl. They get to go that far. But how the animal changes when you get to the Super Bowl, just because of the sheer attention that becomes on your team.
I was going to say, I remember that in college being one of the last two teams and the amount of tension there. Now amplify that 100-fold as you're one of the last two teams left in the NFL dance. Speaking of the NFL dance, coming up next, we will talk about one college player that made the call to go.
Big news out of the college ranks as Texas QB Quinn Ewers has announced that he will enter the NFL draft. Guys, were you surprised by this? What do you think? And where do you possibly see him ending up?
Yeah, so, Dad, this one, I don't think overly surprising. Quinn Ewers, before the Cotton Bowl, told ESPN, I believe, when he sat down with them, that he was not planning on coming back to college, despite all of the rumors out there about the dollar amounts that he was offered by other schools to potentially transfer. Because I think most of us saw the writing on the wall this year, Dad, with Arch Manning when he came in for Quinn when he got injured, how he performed, the talent there, the different element of the game he offers with his legs, and just the way that Quinn's season, I think, tailed off towards the end in terms of production, that this was probably going to be Arch's show finally next year. But I'm seeing a report from 24/7 Sports now that he apparently turned down an $8 million NIL offer, a $6 million NIL offer. And so I know it's going to make the decisions a little more complicated for these guys going forward, but ultimately, I think in a weaker quarterback class than we've seen, the opportunity to go and start making NFL money, still for quarterbacks, Dad, likely going to be something that can make that decision a little easier relative to some of their peers at other spots.
Yeah, this is a draft that really has two first-rounders in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. But the way the position is overvalued, wouldn't be stunned if another one or two sneak into the first round. I mean, the top quarterbacks basically, in whatever order you want to put them, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, right? And the two that are supposed to go in the first round would have been graded behind the 5 or 6 that went in the first round last year. So it is a weaker class. And I'm always amazed that this one always gets me, of the post-playing evaluation of how somebody can improve their status, which blows my mind. Now, again, teams get to interview them, and there is something to an interview process with a quarterback in a film room and such. So from that part, I do understand it. But, the fact that Quinn Ewers, he has medium arm strength, doesn't push the ball down the field very far, kind of gets happy feet and gets out of the pocket before he should. None of that is going to improve from now until showing that in shorts and a T-shirt is not going to make me change what I saw on film of Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers is a second-day guy, at best a second-day quarter, in my opinion. But he may rise up because of the overvaluing of the quarterback position, and still it blows my mind the post-playing rating system of when you're in shorts and a T-shirt and go on visits. Again, I put something to meetings and film and at the chalkboard, but throwing in T-shirts and shorts does nothing for me, in all honesty.
No, but I think it's just really about the desperation for a need at this position right now, a void that's here this offseason that's going to make it interesting there. So, again, with all the things around in there, wasn't totally surprised by that decision from Quinn Ewers' dad. What is interesting, though, is to consider that in the landscape of the rest of college football right now, though, because over the last week, we've seen a number of decision of players deciding to come back to college here. Running backs Katron Allen and Nick Singleton at Penn State both announced they'd be coming back. I think Mel Kiper had them 5-6 on his board amongst running backs coming up in the upcoming NFL draft. So certainly not first rounders here, probably day 2, maybe even day 3 guys, depending on what your needs like at that position. And Dad, knowing what we know now about where the sport is going here, we're getting ready to enter an era where revenue sharing is a part of college football, where $20 to $22 million, at least for this first year in that range, is going to now be allocated for every school to go and spend as they please among sports. And we know and have heard that the majority of that's going to go towards football and basketball. We're not surprised by that, given the moneymakers that they are. But now seeing these dollar amounts, Dad, for quarterbacks, where again, hey, offering $6 million, which, by the way, if you look in the NFL at the percentage of a salary cap that quarterbacks eat up there, Joe Burrow's current salary cap, I think, eats up almost a quarter of the Bengals salary cap. The average salary cap percentage of the top 10 quarterback contracts is just under 22%. So if you were to give Quinn Ewers $6 million a year, if you've got a $22 million salary cap, if you're college football, quick math, that's like 27%. Not insane, Dad, in terms of what the value of that position, if you've got one of them ones, can go and do for your team here. But I think the more interesting math is around a position like running back that can have a bigger effect at the college level still. When you've got a really good one, is will some of these guys elongate college careers because they know, hey, I see the way the NFL chews up and spits out guys at this position if you're not truly special. And if I can make $2, $3, $4 million at that position in college for a year, as opposed to what I'd be making on a rookie running back contract outside of the first round. Now, all of a sudden, these colleges do have an opportunity to use this new windfall of money to sway their future in a way that probably wasn't there before.
Oh, without question, you'll get more players to say, you know what, I'll go start my career and get paid and start my pro career, when now you can make more money staying. And it'll be interesting as the landscape changes, because we know with the lawsuit and the money going to the schools and they'll start the revenue sharing, collectives are going to go by the wayside, right? Colorado already got rid of their NIL collective. Doesn't mean players can't still get NIL money. They just have to go get it basically on their own. There's the collective of schools that offer money to the coaches to give to players that are going to be gone. Other schools are being done with the collectives. Again, I'll state, players can still get NIL money, but have to go get it on their own. It's not going to come from the collective, and it'll be doled out in revenue sharing by the team. So the landscape is changing to where schools are going to dictate how much money you get, not collectives, not the boosters anymore.
Yeah, it is going to change. Some schools are still having some relationship with for-profit collectives, so it's going to be interesting to watch how they manipulate that, because there was a thought that, hey, this would essentially be a salary cap, and how many of the best teams that have been able to go out and outspend other teams would want to all of a sudden cede that advantage here. I do think, Dad, big picture, it's interesting, because when people talk about the transfer portal, when they talk about name, image, and likeness, a lot of people talk about it with a really negative connotation, because they think now players aren't staying at schools very long and it's changing the product and it's making it harder for fans to follow here. Look at this Ohio State team. that brought back the vast majority of the important players from this roster who all had, unfinished business that they wanted against Michigan. But I'm sure we're also very well compensated for a lot of the guys, especially on that defensive side of the ball, that could have gone pro, that could have been high draft picks last year and decided to come back here and now can be financially compensated for it. But what's the net positive? More of this Ohio State team going into this year. The same thing for Penn State, where Drew Aller's coming back here. We just mentioned the running backs coming back here. Daniel Dennis Sutton coming back here on the defensive line here. Zane Durant already coming back at defensive tackle as well. And so you're going to have a group running it back next year that A, believes they can accomplish something, but B, also gives you that opportunity and boost to improve their stock, but then gives you some of that familiarity. Like, we're seeing a couple versions of this. And again, it might just be for the halves, where it is keeping the band together for a little longer because now you have this to offer players. And I think between that and what we've seen is the early returns from the 12-team playoff that have benefited the sport in ways that I didn't even see coming. I do think there are some silver linings that, as we get better at this system, are going to present themselves and give us more of that familiarity that we're looking for in a sport that has felt alien for the last couple of years in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, guys would come back I'm coming back. I'm taking a chance with my NFL draft status to come back because I think this team can do something. So you're kind of, living on a high wire act. But now, you fall off that high wire, you land in a pile of money, right? So it's more of a soft landing for players to decide they're going to come back. It's not just for, I think this team can do something. It's also, I can make a pile of cash. Again, this is for the better players, but that's kind of how the system works. That I can make a pile of cash in the meantime. And when you're that age, you don't think you're going to get hurt. You think your draft status is only going to improve and you're going to make money over the top. That's your thought process when you're 21, 22 years old.
Well, but we did see more and more guys weighing that business decision, guys sitting out more, guys pulling out in the middle of seasons, guys certainly sitting out bowl season. And now, where before it used to have to be, I got to take out an insurance policy. How hard is it going to be to collect on that historically? Now, the insurance policy is the very real salary that you're making as a college athlete that all of a sudden, to your point, can affect decisions for some of these guys further down the pecking order who may have had to leap before they were ready in order to make money that they needed and now can stay closer to home. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and all those other fun places. Thank you to our guest today, Andrew Whitworth from NFL on Prime, who stopped by, help us talk about the divisional round coming up this weekend in the NFL. If you missed any of that conversation, make sure you check it out wherever you get our podcasts, or right here on YouTube. As soon as we get done here, I'm getting up out this hotel in New Orleans. Again, a bunch of fun stuff that we shot down here. Can't wait to show you guys during Super Bowl week. But in the meantime, let's get to this, that, and the third, because the NFL, guys, is doing some traveling here as we start with this. The NFL announced on Wednesday that the Colts have been designated as the home team for the league's first regular season game in Berlin, Germany. It's going to take place next season here. They get to be the home squad there. And so, Dad, while questions about Anthony Richardson and their future might persist, as noted, he is not pictured in this one. Quentin Nelson, Jonathan Taylor at running back here, and Forrest Buckner at defensive tackle, the three Colts represented on the graphic. But either way, they're going to be heading across the pond for yet another foray into the NFL overseas.
Yeah, listen, the NFL overseas has been unbelievably successful. I still never think there is going to be a team in London, or let alone a division in London, but I do think that will only increase as far as playing in different parts of the world to expand the game. It's very popular wherever it goes. It fills stadiums. So I definitely think that will continue. And while it throws the schedule off a little bit for players, it's the first game of the season. They won't be getting a bye the second week, obviously, not doing byes that early in the season. It definitely, you have to manage the schedule for the players, but it's only going to increase.
Yep, and this is the first game in Berlin. There has been a game in Munich in Germany back in 2022 when the Buccaneers played the Seahawks at Allianz Arena in Munich. And so every NFL team's required to host one game, I believe, overseas in 8-year period. We know basically it's the Jacksonville Jaguars in London as a residency almost every year. I disagree with that. I think at some point the NFL, driven by greed, will force somebody to go and live their life overseas while they play that. But either way, a cool experience. I know plenty of guys that have gotten to play these London trips. You mentioned you've gotten to go and call those games here. It is a unique experience, but it is also taxing on the body in a way that NFL ownership continues to just seem to forsake for profit. So I can't act all that surprised.
I actually played in London twice when I was playing. The game in London was an exhibition game. So we went over. I went over there twice and played where we practiced for the week over there and then played an exhibition game over there. So I have been there. It has been on the NFL schedule, but only in preseason. So obviously it's evolved to many stops in different countries in the regular season.
I was going to say, man, I just think of more and more now because I am the age of the old players. Like, God, we talk about Travis Kelce like he's decrepit and he's literally my exact age. But the one thing I thought about them was when I went to Japan this summer and the jet lag there and back. I'm like, all I could think about was imagine being a professional athlete, having to try and manage your body on the back end of this to come back and play another one of these football games. Gave me a profound bit of respect for what these guys are going to deal with one way or the other in these games. One way or the other, let's get to that, Jesse, here, and something I know you're very excited about, and I have a very important question for you coming off this.
Okay, something I have been passionate about for a long time has finally come to fruition. The mommies have won. Red dye number 3 has been banned by the FDA from food, drinks, and ingested drugs in the U.S. So red dye number 3, you gone. And manufacturers have until apparently 2027, January 2027, to remove red dye number 3 from their items. Fare thee well, you shall not be missed.
So a couple of things in here. One, fine, cool. I'm happy for everyone involved, or I'm sorry that happened to you. My only edict for RFK Jr. remains stay away from Uncrustables. If any of those memes actually become reality here, we will find you. But I digress. I'm just kidding. That's not a threat. No one from the government come for me here. These are jokes. This is fun. I love Uncrustables. Feel the need to say to that for the CIA agent that's listening on the line right now. But anyway, I would say for this, Jesse, you mentioned it. This is a mommy project that a lot of people saw on social media. So I ask you, what is next up? And can we convince the mommies to maybe go after some things in the world of sports? Because I feel like if we weaponized passionate moms and the Swifties that have found their way into the NFL, we could get a lot done that the competition committee falls short on here. And so I'm just wondering if you guys are for hire in that way where we can convince you to come to our cause.
Well, red dye number 40 is next for those asking. So red dye number 3, you were first. Red dye number 40, watch your back. As for utilizing the mommies, yeah, that could happen, but I'm not sure you want them to get utilized in comfort football because helmets, CT,
Yeah, I get it. My thought process here is the NFL is just too big to topple, Dad. And so at the very least, can we get the mommies and the Swifties circling around something like the onside kick? It's become useless the way we've changed the rules, no surprise onside. Let's get them to advocate for that 4th and 18 free play that the onside kicking team would have to try and go after it. And if we can do that, Jesse, is that something you feel like you could rally the troops on?
Yeah, we just tell them there's red dye number 40 in it.
There we go. See,
right.
All we got to do is point them in that direction. So, yeah. Dad, I think it's worth it to try and enlist these folks in our cause here to try and make sure that the onside kick's eliminated because I'm sick and tired of it at this point.
I mean, because while it's a couple of years, it's actually pretty quick, right? The move acts on a November 2022 petition submitted by multiple advocacy organizations, obviously,
mommies.
Jesse. But really, for it to happen in a couple of years seems to be actually pretty quick nowadays, right? Not getting dragged along.
Yeah, it's happening fast. The mommies get things done. That's the truth.
And that's why I want to sick them on the NFL competition committee. So we'll talk offline about this and see if we can draft up some sort of deal here. Yeah. We'll red dye 40 this thing into it and we'll call it a day. Perfect. Jesse, let's get to the third though here and finish off with something fun, a creative solution. Modern problems require modern solutions. And apparently Australian television is capable of pulling off just that.
So the Australian Open had broadcast restrictions, that sounds vague, that resulted in them having to use Wii characters on their broadcast. So they went in here and they said, all right, for whatever reason, we have some restrictions, we can't show the matches. So they just came out and did a little Wii broadcast, which sounds fake, but as you can see here, it happened. So I don't even know.
Yeah, no, Dad, I think in a day and age where we have seen altcasts become so popular here, we just are fresh off the Simpsons one. This is a way to go, and Wii Tennis is part of the zeitgeist, man. Like, that has been something for a long time. When the Wii tried to get us up off our asses and failed because I figured out how to work the remote from laying flat back on my couch here, at the very least, this is a great way to use that now that that effort failed.
Well, I think that this isn't like, oh my God, how new is this? As you said, we had The Simpsons, we have Nickelodeon for the last few years as well. We're starting to do these altcasts. Now, this was forced by, broadcasting issues, but still, I don't think it's like as wow as it's been because we've seen it before, and it actually looks pretty cool.
I think this would be a great way to go for, like, instead of courtroom animations, what if we just did reenactments of what goes on in court cases with Wii characters here? Because we've seen absurd drawings for years. I think, or for a while, we had those cartoons. I forget what country they came from that were really wild and out of pocket. Jesse, it feels like Wii Court could be our next iteration of this.
I mean, that sounds like $1 million idea to me. Yeah, Wii Court. Like, they're not letting the cameras in for whatever reason. So it's like, okay, we'll just, like you said, have our own dramatic recreation. Or for all those like Netflix documentaries, we can just have the Wii people reenacting it.
They could have filled the stadium, though. I mean, when they took shots of the stadium, it was basically empty. They could have, taken, their own license there and kind of filled it.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I was going to say that one, we don't need to let the truth get in the way of a good story here.
Yeah.
Pack the Wii stands. Do whatever you must here. Bring over some folks from some other game franchises, maybe. I feel like the Animal Crossing crew would have a great time at the Australian Open here. Maybe get a couple of Super Smash Brothers characters. I know I'm maybe mixing genres a bit, but I think, again, all things are possible. Add it to the ledger for the mommies to go and take care of as we get ready for the off-season to-do list here. Your to-do list. Download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.